What is going on, Canes Sport, and welcome to another Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. I'm Izubee Charles, joined by Stephen Wagner. Wags, the Miami Hurricanes landed another commitment on that offensive line as the Canes added another brick to the Great Wall of Mirabal, and that is 2026 interior offensive lineman J.J. Sparks out of Bowles High School in Jacksonville, Florida. He was one of the many guys that was on campus this past weekend and actually spent Thursday to Saturday on campus with the Hurricanes. Got a real in-depth look at what Miami had to offer. Was going to visit Florida State for an official visit this summer, but canceled that and shut down his recruitment. He's completely locked in with the Canes and now the eighth member of Miami's 2026 class. Second commitment coming out of that weekend following Joe Irvin a few days later, but Miami Hurricanes got it done. So what are your thoughts about J.J. Sparks and the commitment to the Canes?
Yeah, Miami going into Jacksonville, an area that historically has been Florida State territory, pulling a top offensive lineman out of there. This is a guy that is really, really high on Miami's board. The Hurricanes really do love him. Excuse me. Miami really does love him. And I do want to say, I do think this is a really good year overall, top to bottom for offensive linemen. I really do think there are probably 7 or 8 guys that are absolutely good enough to potentially play at Miami. JJ Sparks wanted to go ahead and lock in his spot. Ben Congdon obviously was the first to come off the board. Then Joel Irvin over the weekend, and now, JJ didn't say this to me, but I do think that it's kind of apparent that some guys are seeing players come off the board, lock in their spots. They know there's a finite number of players Miami is going to take, and I do think that puts a little bit of pressure on some of these kids to want to go ahead and lock in their place at Miami. Big body interior lineman who really likes to play with an edge, very physical. Overall, decently polished for a high school recruit who's ranked in, I think the 700s or something. I think he is a little bit better than people realize and kind of appreciate. Now, that being said, I do think he'll probably benefit from having a year in the locker room and in the weight room to kind of adjust. But overall, this is another pretty good pickup, and that offensive line is really starting to take shape.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned, guys starting to lock in their spot with the Hurricanes early. Actually, Joel Irvin actually said that. He said, "Hey, I want to get in early. I want to start recruiting with that 2026 class and solidify my spot with the Canes." And as you said, J.J. Sparks followed suit and did just that. And Sierra offensive lineman who's been a day one starter at Bowles High School, which is one of the more notable programs in the Sunshine State. And J.J. has been making plays for those guys since he was a freshman. So another great pickup for the Hurricanes. But we're going to take it back a little bit, talk about the 2025 class. As we all know, Miami Northwestern cornerback Javari Flowers is the final piece to that puzzle to the 2025 class. Miami was in it to the very end, but ultimately ended up signing with the University of Florida. Steven, I know you've been all over this recruitment. Just what are your thoughts on the Javari Flowers situation now that we're finally putting a bow on the 2025 class?
Yeah, well, it's official. The 2025 class is done. We are finally done with 2025 recruiting. Thought we were done with it back in December, but ended up getting dragged out a little bit longer. But hey, that's okay. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. But we're finally completely through everything. So, now that everything is actually formally wrapped up, I did want to take a minute, kind of look back and just sort of put a bow on the Javari Flowers situation because of how interesting it was. Javari was a player that we initially expected to be a member of the 2026 class when the year started. Then around late January, he goes ahead and he announces that he wants to formally reclassify from 2026 to 2025. I had originally put in an RPM for Miami to get Flowers as kind of one of my way too early predictions for the 2026 class, back when I still thought he was going to be a member of 2026. But he decides that he wants to go ahead, reclassify to 2025, and very quickly kind of rush through the recruiting process. Obviously, February was a dead period. Then in March, he goes ahead and he takes a bunch of official visits to a ton of different schools, including Miami, and before eventually announcing on March 31st, because the deadline for him to go ahead and sign as a member of the 2025 class was going to be April 1st, or otherwise he would have to be a member of 26. So he goes on all of these official visits, and basically toward the end, kind of in that final week, it starts to kind of narrow down to Miami, Florida, and Notre Dame. Those are the three schools that it kind of seems like, are the most likely potential landing spots. Ends up choosing Florida over Notre Dame and Miami. Miami, it felt like wasn't a massive, massive contender in the end. It now they did push very, very hard, and the Hurricanes were right there for quite a bit of this. But after that after his official visit to Miami, which was his last official visit, it kind of felt like maybe the Hurricanes were a name that we weren't really hearing quite as much. We did hear a lot of Notre Dame and Florida. Did it kind of surprise me that Miami ended up being a little bit out of the mix? At first, it kind of did. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, it doesn't totally surprise me that much just because I think this was kind of a bad timing thing. I think that had he been a member of the 2026 class, Miami would have had a much better chance to grab him. But with him suddenly making the decision to reclassify to 2025, Miami had already signed everyone that they wanted in 2025, and at that point, they were starting to focus on the portal. Whatever late additions they would have in the class were going to be portal additions. They were going to be additions that they expected to be used in the fall. Some guys that hopefully were coming to Miami with college experience. And we obviously know that Miami wants to add some more receivers. Who knows? Maybe they could end up getting a running back or a linebacker. Some pieces here and there based on how the spring goes. But the timing of this thing really, I think, ended up complicating things for Miami and kind of putting them in a little bit of a weird position. Miami and Flowers, they communicated pretty quickly after he made the decision to reclassify. And and Flowers in his camp, they decided, they wanted to go ahead and go on all of these official visits. But things just straight up, ended up not working out for Miami. I do think that in the end, like I said, if he was a member of the 2026 class, I do think it would have ended up being a very, very different story because Miami would have had a full year to try to build that relationship, to try to get him to Coral Gables. But I think because he had to rush through the full recruiting process on such short notice, it made things a little bit complicated. Then also, you add on top of that the fact that Miami did offer him relatively late. They just offered him, I think it was last summer. So they weren't one of the schools that was really, really heavily on him aggressively from the jump. They came into his picture a little bit late. And I think, because they'd already come into the picture late. And now on top of that, you're kind of having to, cram an entire you're having to cram an entire recruitment into basically the months of, February and March. It just made things, it made things hard. And, sometimes, it sucks, but sometimes things just don't work out. And I think that's what this was. If I'm a Hurricane fan, I'm not losing a ton of sleep. Although I do know that, Miami obviously is not happy that they ended up having to lose a recruit to Florida. I don't think there's, anyone at Miami who, wanted Flowers to end up going to their rival, but it's just the way that things worked out. And, sometimes you just kind of have to shrug your shoulders and move on because, no matter how much, you might want a kid, it's kind of like a relationship. If you like her and she likes you, but for whatever reason, it just seems like there's something a little off, or maybe the timing isn't right, or maybe this thing isn't totally working out. Sometimes you just have to say maybe it's not meant to be right now. Now, of course, the elephant in the room is going to be the transfer portal because obviously a player can enter the transfer portal whenever they want. And People ask, well, could he be in the transfer portal at some point in the future? I think, it's really hard to speculate if a player is going to be in the portal right after he ends up signing to a school. That's like asking, hey, do you think that Luke Nickel is going to be in the portal? Right now, do we think that 1 year from now, Luke Nickel is going to be a quarterback on the open market? We have no idea. No one has any idea. No one knows. But I think that right now everyone's kind of coming to terms with what it is, kind of the way that things ended up shaking out. Um, I do think that in the end, Miami is going to be fine. Flowers, I really did like him. He was, an elite return man, absolutely electric punt and kick returner. I think as an actual cornerback, there were maybe some questions about his overall size and his length. Certainly has, like truly elite speed, but definitely a little bit on the smaller side for a defensive back. We'll see what ends up happening at Florida. We'll end up seeing, how he does at Florida. I think there's a great chance he could be Florida's starting kick returner, starting punt returner, what have you, next season. Who knows? Maybe there's a chance that he does end up returning kicks or punts at Hard Rock whenever Florida comes to Miami. Although, I'm sure quite a few Miami fans and obviously Miami staffers aren't, going to be super thrilled about that. But sometimes this stuff just happens, man. At the end of the day, I really do think all of this just came down to bad timing, and sometimes it happens.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And obviously, you never want to see a prospect like Javari Flowers leave your back garden. Obviously, there's always two sides to the coins, and I'm gonna start with a little bit of negative and end with a positive. Like you mentioned, Javari Flowers is one of, if not the best returners I've seen since I've covered South Florida football these past 3 years. Like you never want to see a guy like that leave your backyard and go to your biggest rival. And obviously, Miami fans would have wanted to see him return a kickoff and punt returns in the orange and green, not in the orange and blue. But that's another conversation for another day. On the flip side, you look at Miami's 2025 defensive back haul, regardless, a lot of good talented guys coming in. And through the transfer portal, you add young guys like Xavier Lucas, Jabori Antoine, Chris Ewald, Bryce Fitzgerald's not even on campus yet. And, we know the type of athlete he is. So, hey, there's a lot of young talent coming from South Florida that's going to be in that program, in that defensive back room. But I feel like Javari Flowers would have been that cherry on top. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, with that timeline shifted, that kind of, I'm not going to say messed up Miami's, focus on Javari Flowers, but that makes you, push these, chess pieces this way or push these chess pieces another way. It's kind of messes things up, but obviously hate to lose a guy like that, but you can't dwell on it. And we'll close that 2025 recruiting class. Was an amazing class with, the one more guy would have been great to add to that group. But hey, Miami still has an awesome defensive back haul in that group. And I'm excited to see what those young guys can do that are going to be in Coral Gables for the next 3 to 4 years. So we'll end that with that 2025 class and, continue to talk about the 2026 class. And this spring, Miami's had a lot of big time guys, throughout. Obviously, we had a big, summer splash this past weekend. Ended up with a commitment from Joel Irvin, the 2026 offensive lineman from Fort Myers. Shout out to the 239. My guys back home always got to give those guys some love. But some other big time recruits are going to be on campus, this upcoming weekend, spending time with the Hurricanes down there in Coral Gables. Not the eye-catching list as last week, but some, crucial guys in crucial positions. And first off, I want to start off at running back. Obviously, Miami has Javian Mallard committed in the 2026 class, but Jay Lamar is another guy came to super, super high out of Colquitt County in Georgia. Actually, cousins with Nikar, and a guy that's rising, on a lot of recruiting boards across the country. Has been one of Miami's top running back targets. Obviously, Derek Cooper is that guy that, a lot of Miami fans know about and love, and a few other names. But Stevens, kind of talk about Jay Lamar and kind of what's going on with him and the Hurricanes.
Yeah, Miami is absolutely really, really high on Jay Lamar. He is right there at the top of their list of running backs, guys that they feel really good about just in terms of, overall production on the field, the way he pops out on film. I mean, from every conversation that I've had, it just sounds like he is an absolute dude that this staff loves. And so this week they are going to roll out the red carpet for him. Now, as we're taping this, we're taping this on Wednesday. He's already on campus. He's going to be on campus from Wednesday until Saturday. Matt Merritt is going to do absolutely everything he can to get Lamar. Now, obviously, Clemson right there too. Tigers are doing a really good. Tigers, I think, are doing a really good job. But Miami really does feel like they are right there. Like they have an awesome chance. I think a really good visit this weekend could potentially give the Hurricanes a chance to go ahead and spring forward into the pole position. Um, Miami absolutely loves him. I keep on saying it because I cannot emphasize it enough. I had someone tell me that they think he might have the highest overall ceiling of
Wow.
any running back that they are recruiting in this year's class. Obviously, Derek Cooper is known for being extremely explosive. But Jay Lamar, I think, might kind of be the most well-rounded back with the highest overall ceiling. I know he definitely likes the idea of playing behind a very good offensive line, which Miami obviously has. He was down in Coral Gables on February 1st. He's back. He's back at Miami now, and he'll also be back for an official visit. On top of that, I really do feel like Miami is right there. Miami absolutely does have a very legitimate chance to get Lamar.
Yeah, and a ton of names on that recruiting running back recruiting board. Like you mentioned, Jay Lamar might be closer to the top than a lot of people think, and for good reason. Like you mentioned, one of the most well-rounded backs in that 2026 class, and Matt Merritt absolutely loves him. And having a guy on campus from Wednesday to Saturday is absolutely massive. And the Hurricanes, like you said, are going to be able to roll out that red carpet for Jay Lamar, and then obviously having Nykar, his cousin, on the roster this year, having the chance to kind of see a day in the life from a person that he's really familiar with could be also huge for the Hurricanes. So we'll have that Jay Lamar recruitment saga from this week covered all over Kane Sports. So make sure to head there. And another big time recruit that's going to be on campus is a guy that not too many people really know about in that wide receiver room. That's 2026 four-star pass catcher Jalen Lott, who Miami absolutely loves. Is going to be making his way down to campus. Steven, you had the chance to kind of pick Jalen Lott's brain a little bit, or just what's your thoughts on that situation and kind of where things stand with Lott and the Canes?
Yeah, so I had the chance to catch up with him earlier in the week, and he went ahead and informed me that he is going to be coming to Miami this weekend. Right now, there really is a pretty solid contingent of schools after him. Texas is really high on him. So is Ohio State. So is Georgia. So is USC. So is LSU. So is Oregon. There's currently an RPM in for him to end up at Oregon. But right now, I really do feel like Miami has, a pretty decent chance. I think the Hurricanes are right in there, with the rest of the pack. Now, whenever things really took off, whenever Mario Cristobal went down to his school and was able to meet with him one on one in January, he let Lott know that Miami had real interest in him, and Lott reciprocated it pretty immediately. He said, "Yeah, I've got real interest in you guys too," and communication kind of took off from there. Mario Cristobal is absolutely playing a significant factor in Lott's interest. I really do think the Cristobal's personality, his culture, the way he runs things in Miami, that's definitely factoring in. He likes Kevin Beard a lot too, but Mario Cristobal is definitely playing a role.
Yeah, if you're a Canes fan, make sure to check out Jalen Lott, who is one of Miami's top targets on that pass catching board with Coach Kevin Beard. And a lot of big time prospects on that, wide receiver board. And Lott is definitely a guy we'll be monitoring, throughout this weekend and throughout the rest of this 2026 cycle. And obviously, check out all that we have at canesport.com, whether that be recruiting, basketball, football, and everything in between. We'll have you covered with all of that. And like the banner says down below, test drive canesport.com for $1 for a week. Come check out what Steven and I, Matt Shadow, and Gary all have to say on the message boards, where we have a lot of fun, talking to you guys and, giving you guys some exclusive scoops as well. So make sure to check that out. For Steven Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for watching.